Hey everyone, it's me, Kirk Mastin. I'm back again, and today we're going to be talking about artificial light, off-camera flash, and how to get a really nice look with Mastin Labs in those lighting conditions. So I'm going to just start off just by talking for a second about our three-step workflow. It's very important to us. We've made everything as simple as possible in the complexity, because the presets are complex. They're modeled after film, but we've hidden that all under the hood so that all you need to do is three steps. You need to apply the preset, adjust the exposure, and then adjust white balance and tint as needed, because those are the things that a camera can't do for you. Only you know what environment you were shooting in. And that leads us right into a studio environment or an environment with off-camera flash. And how do you edit for that? So, my good friend who I have yet to meet, but I would love to meet someday, Carl Jones II, sent us another amazing photo for this episode. And yeah, first of all, I just want to say I love everything about this photo. It's amazing. Love the composition, the color, like the color palette is really cool. These orange pants, and then the background that's kind of this like teal green, super cool. And even this little touch with this necklace is really nice. So great expression, great everything. So good job, I love it. This was definitely shot in studio. If I look at this, it says flash did not fire, or did fire. Okay, so flash did fire, so you have some kind of off-camera, maybe a softbox or a beauty dish or something, probably camera right, which is left for us, and maybe some kind of fill, like a V-flat or some kind of fill on the right. But it looks really good. All right, so the basics. The most important thing when you're shooting with off-camera flash or with a softbox or any kind of like artificial lighting situation is that you want to stick to the films and then the presets that are made from those films that are most suitable for that lighting. So in general, you would never shoot really super contrasty, saturated analog films in those conditions unless you were modeling the light super careful to reduce the contrast ratio as much as possible, because artificial and strobe, they create contrast. They have very sharp fall off usually, unless you have a huge like octabank light modifier, like a huge light source. So you don't want to like compound the contrast from the flash with a contrasty film or preset, if that makes sense. So you're going to want to stay away from the really powerful contrasty films like Ektar. Ektar is like an outdoor film, and if you use it in a studio setting, you can see that it's just like totally wild. It's like way too much. That's my first tip. Gold may work on this. That's still a little bit too strong. So for an indoor studio session, anything that's from the original packs, like the Portra original pack or the Fujicolor original pack, that's going to be your best bet. So in this image, I'm going to do Fuji 400H, and you can see it's not like an insane shift. And then you can use the tools inside of the pack to further play with contrast and even out the lighting and make it how you want. So I would use like all soft, and as I roll over it, you can see that the highlights are knocked down a little bit, and that gives it just a really nice professional sheen, like a nice finishing touch. The other thing too is there's kind of these darkened corners. That could be from the way that it was shot, just the lighting pattern, or it could be from the lens itself. I doubt it's the lens, because this lens was shot at f9. So Carl definitely has experience shooting fashion or editorial, because that's just a trend I see, is that you're using very stop down lenses to get all that detail. When you really are into like fashion editorial on a professional level, I see that all the time. So there's not going to be much vignetting in the corners, but we can check anyway with lens correction. So lens correction on does absolutely nothing, because you're only using the center part of the lens at f9. So awesome. And the three-step workflow. Yes, I mentioned that. So step one, I applied the preset. I skipped the other two steps because the color balance and the exposure look perfect. and I just went to a bonus step 4 of using a tone profile to even out the highlights and shadows. I could possibly warm this up just a little bit, but I think it's perfect how it is. So here is before and after. In fact, maybe exposure down just a tiny bit. There we go. And it's a very simple process. It was just picking the right preset for this lighting. So in this case, Fuji 400H from the Fuji Color Original Pack is perfect. It's quick and easy. If you had like a bunch of photos from this session and you shot in manual and kept everything the same, you could edit one and then apply those settings to the rest and finish your entire shoot in like 5 minutes, like all the editing, rather than hand editing each one, which I strongly advise against. So, but anyway, thank you, Carl Jones II, for sending this. I love getting really beautiful photos like this, and very well executed too. All right, so sometimes I get asked, like, you know, what would you do with a photo like this? So this has also got off-camera strobe. And one of the things people want to do immediately when they see a photo that's lit like this is they want to reveal this other side of his face. And that can prove problematic if you're using presets of any kind. And I'll do an edit like that first, and then I'll show you what the real issue is. So on this guy, I'm going to use Portra Original. It's a little bit warmer of a film stock. We'll do like Portra. Let's do Portra 800. So I applied it. I'm going to do my exposure adjustments. Now, not the average person. We kind of, like, as humans, want to see his whole face. It just seems like that's what we're wanting. So I'm going to try to like reveal his face, and no matter how high I pull this up, we can't see his face. Let me finish the temperature adjustment. So temperature, tint looks about right, maybe a little bit more magenta. Okay, so we can't get to his face with the exposure. I could try shadow soft, which opens up the shadows a little bit, or even all soft. Whoops, that's all hard. All soft, which lowers the highlights, so I can raise this again. But really, like, no matter what we do, we're not kind of digging into that shadow detail. And that could be frustrating to many people. Let me create a virtual copy. So what I propose to you is, without any presets, I still cannot get to that part of his face. No matter what I do to edit, and in this case you see we're not protecting the highlights very well because we're not using a film modeled preset with it. I could try to protect it with just some of these sliders, but it's going to look kind of weird. What I would say about an image like this is don't worry about the part that's invisible because of shadow. This photo was shot intentionally with this harsh lighting pattern because we're not meant to see this part of his face. And in light of that, I would focus on getting the exposure and color and contrast control dialed in for what you can see. So in this case, I would even bring it down. I wouldn't try to fight and get that brought up. I would just try to get what I can see back down to the right amount. Something like that. So there's before and after. It's as good as it can be for how it was meant to be shot. And it actually, once it's all corrected with Portra 800, it looks really nice. It's a really cool photo. It's kind of edgy. Like, I kind of like that you can't see that side of his face. So this is by Carlos Avilla, and I love it. Okay, so let's move on. Here is another tricky lighting situation, and this is super tricky. And a lot of wedding photographers can probably relate to this. So this isn't like, maybe it's off-camera strobe, I'm not sure, but sometimes you are working in heavily gelled lights, and a lot of weddings you have like uplighting that's like purple or blue or whatever. And a lot of times people ask, like, should I be trying to get good skin tones, or should I be, emphasizing that color, or what should I do? And my advice is, again, find a preset that complements it in a nice way. And don't worry too much about making it look realistic. This was gelled intentionally, and you just kind of want to bring out the beauty of what it is. So I think for this one, I'm going to dive back into Fuji Color Original, do Fuji 400H, and then play with the exposure to kind of just bring it out a little bit. As far as like temperature is concerned, you know, we don't know what kind of, you know, lighting situation we're in here. It's so heavily modified that, you know, who knows. So I'm going to just sweep this back and forth and just see what feels more pleasing. I think it feels more pleasing to warm them up just a tiny bit. And then as far as tint goes, you know, you can back off on that purple or just leave it as is. And I didn't do too much to the photo, but I like how this preserves the feeling of the photo, but just makes it a little more colorful and crisp and three-dimensional. So that's my advice for like heavily modified artificial light, is just let it be what it is. You know, I can imagine someone sending me this photo and going, can you get the skin tones right? And I'm like, okay, we can try, but it's so modified that even if I correct for some of his skin, the other part is going to look really crazy. So, you know, it's all purple, so we could just add a ton of green and try to get some kind of normal skin tone. So actually, it's not too bad. So there's like that's kind of amazing, actually. We actually corrected most of it out. Actually, I like this too. Forget what I just said. But usually, it's not worth trying to fight the lighting condition that you're in if it's like heavily gelled on purpose. But yeah, that's how you would do it, is this extreme change on the temperature and tint sliders. So this is by Chris Brown, and thank you for sending it in. Okay, what other situation do we have here? This is a good one. So again, we have off-camera flash. So this photographer is doing a very classic maneuver where they're trying to overpower the sun a bit from behind. So they've got like some kind of softbox or off-camera flash in front and trying to balance that with the background here. I'm assuming to preserve all the detail in the photo. This is a raw photo, so it's kind of hard to see right here, but because raw photos are really flat, but there's a lot of contrast in this photo. Like if I even touch the contrast slider like I normally would on just the beginning of any photo if I was hand editing it, which I don't recommend doing, it automatically just kind of gets super contrasty. We're going to face the same issue with using any kind of preset. So let's see, maybe for these people, again, I'm going to stay away from the push packs because they have a lot of contrast because they're pushed films, and I'm going to go back into the original packs. So this couple, it doesn't seem like a light and airy photo, so I'm going to go for maybe, I think Portrait 400. So Portrait 400, increase the exposure a little bit, warm it up just a tiny bit, and I think it needs a little bit of green. Let me see how their skin is. Just a tiny bit of green. And we're still left with this like extreme contrast. So again, you can go back into all soft and kind of mellow that out. That brings up the shadow detail and brings down the highlight detail, or brings it back. And from there, you can go up in exposure again just a little bit. I'm actually going to warm it up again. But we're still kind of stuck with that same problem of, you know, looking at it, your eye wants to go, well, this all seems too dark back here. How do I lighten that up? The photo was just not shot in a way that, you know, you're fighting against the contrast in the original lighting pattern that lives on through the edit. And really, there's not easy ways to save it without kind of breaking the film look. What you could do is maybe take the contrast slider down just a little bit, but that really doesn't even do it either because the difference back here is so extreme. You could go beyond all soft and bring up the shadows more, maybe a little bit more. Actually, that doesn't look too bad. But at that point, you're kind of going off the rails of the intended film look from which everything is modeled. If I was shooting Portrait 400 film on this couple, it would actually have scanned like this. This would not have been possible in the scanner that, you know, at that time shooting real film. So you can feel free to raise the shadow slider a little bit yourself if you want, or even the black slider. But at that point, you're losing the micro contrast that is part of that film, and that's kind of a trade-off. So we usually advise against it, and just to try to get your lighting right in camera. Meaning, if you want a soft look, don't do harsh lighting. If you want a soft look, do soft lighting. If you want a harsh look, do harsh lighting, and so on. I hope that is useful. So on this photo, I believe the photographer is using a reversible reflector, possibly. I see these round catch lights in her eyes, and those could either be a beauty dish, it has a really nice soft fall off, or possibly a big reflector someone is holding. Let me see if a flash was fired. Flash did fire. Okay, so I'm going to say it's probably a beauty dish, aimed kind of like 45 up above her. Again, really nice lighting. A little less harsh than, say, the photo we just did, where this looks like a bare strobe, you know, like a strobe that would be on your camera, and they took it off and maybe fired it wirelessly, you know, 5 feet off to the side or something. That strobe is going to have a tiny little light source, and that means harsh light. Whereas this was probably a huge beauty dish, like right almost on top of her, and that's going to be a lot softer fall off. There is still going to be a kind of a contrast issue in this photo, but nowhere near as extreme as this. But let's see what happens. So I'm going to go back into one of the original packs, either Portra Original or Fuji Original, and we'll see how it holds up. Okay, they're kind of saturated for her. Let me see the Fuji Color Original. Looks pretty good. So Fuji 400H neutral. And then I would increase the exposure a bit, and damn, that looks really good. All right. Her skin is already kind of that olive toned skin. So, you know, Fuji will add a little cyan and red to her skin, and also a little bit of luminosity. So this feels about right to me. There's no strange color shifts in the background. Maybe I would warm it up just a little bit. That is your before and after. And the reason I'm not digging into like all soft or all hard like I did on the other off-camera or studio shots is that the original lighting pattern for her is so soft. Because she's a small person, huge beauty dish, probably just right outside of camera, that it's creating this softer fall off, like along the side of her face, compared to, I mean, here, like this guy, you know, this is really extreme. This again is probably a small light source right off to his side, so no light can kind of sneak around to the other side. If you would have put some kind of reflector or something on the other side to bounce a little bit of it back, that would have opened up his face. And that's just a lighting modifier, and I'm assuming that everyone watching this is at least a little bit interested in off-camera flash or, you know, lighting modifiers, so you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this is like small light source, but a little more in front. And now we're talking like more of a professional studio fashion grade light source, like a beauty dish that's a big dish meant to give a soft light at an angle. All right, let's talk about there being no, you know, modifier. Like you're just at an event and there's weird light everywhere, tungsten light, neon light up above. This did fire. Okay, a flash did fire. I'm going to guess that the flash was on camera and pointed straight at the ceiling. So this is where you're using room fill flash. So the ceiling's probably white or something close to white. You have the flash on camera, you tilted the head up, and then allowed some ambient light to mix with the light bouncing off the ceiling as fill light, and you get this. So what do you do? Well, the first issue here is that you're going to have, in this photo, at least 3 color temperatures. You have these kind of weird, you know, neon purple lights. You have the ambient tungsten, which you can see more and more as you get to the side of the frame. So look at how yellow she is compared, well, they're all pretty yellow, but like him, for example, he and his bride are starting to pick up a little more of that clean white light from the strobe bouncing off the ceiling. But it changes as you go from the middle of the frame, and you can even see the light on the floor. As you go from the middle off to the side, it gets more yellow. So we got a lot of stuff going on here. For a photo like this, people will ask, you know, should I correct for skin tone, or what should I do? Should I try to like neutralize all the light? And I would say no. You want to fix the skin tones a little bit, like a little bit towards more natural, but you don't want to neutralize it so much that you forget that you're in a room that was lit for a festivity, like that's supposed to be interesting looking. So you want to hit kind of a middle ground. So in this case, actually the first thing I would do, it's just me, very first thing I would do is I would do, where is it? I go in the transform panel and do auto with constrained crop and try to get this image a little bit more corrected. Like not it was just kind of like leaning over backwards and stuff, and I just can't do that. So this is like actually one of the best improvements you can do right off the bat, is just try to take the distortion out. But I digress. Okay, back to editing. There's a lot of contrast in this scene, so I'd probably pick something from one of the original packs, Fujicolor Original, Portrait Original. I've already got Fujicolor Original open. So there's Fuji 400H. I apply it. The exposure checks out just fine. It's a little bit brighter in the middle. Okay, so there's a little, that's interesting. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Exposure checks out just fine. Temperature, maybe it could be cooled down just a little bit. You don't want to cool it down too much, or again, you lose the feeling of the room. So you don't want to do that. So I'm just going to cool it a little bit. And then tint. You get this kind of weird magenta mid-tone tint with flash. I don't know why it happens. I shot weddings for 20 years and I still don't know why it happens, but you can correct it out by sliding the tint slider towards green just a few points. And there you have a basically corrected photo, where you're keeping the feeling of the room, you know, the festive atmosphere, the lighting that they set up, but it doesn't look cold and fake or sterile. It just looks clean. And the last thing I would do is, this lens was shot at f2.2. It didn't even occur to me because everything is sharp from front to back. But it's a 20 millimeter lens, so it's super wide, so that means the depth of field is really deep. This is a whole side note for like lens geeks, you know what I'm talking about. So I didn't even think of this, but we can use lens correction to correct out the vignetting on the side, unless you like it. I mean, then you can leave it in. It's totally up to you. And now we have a really nice, clean, easy to read photo, all cleaned up, but it still looks correct for the lighting. And that is due in part by sticking to one of the original packs that already has less contrast in it. All right, I hope you enjoyed my TED Talk on lighting. No, that's really fun. And yeah, it's really about like being a film or preset sommelier. Like you got to know kind of like what pairs with what, and once you get that, things get way easier. But hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can always reach us directly at m.me/Mastin Labs. You can also join our Facebook group, the Mastin Labs Facebook community, where there's never a bad question. We love to help everybody succeed on their path, and you can also drop your images in there to be edited by community members. So you can see what your images look like with different presets even before you buy, see if it's right for you. So I hope you enjoyed everything today, and yeah, until next time, have a great day and happy editing.